Part 1. The Double Shift. The clock on the wall showed 6:45 p.m. when Rosa wiped down another table at the Grand Meridian Hotel. Her feet were killing her. She'd been on them since morning, and the shift was far from over. At 28 years old, she knew every corner of this hotel like the back of her hand. 5 years of working here would do that to you. Tonight wasn't just any regular evening, though. The hotel was buzzing with activity, and Rosa could feel the energy in the air. The annual charity gala was happening in the main ballroom, and she'd been pulled in to help with the catering staff. It meant extra hours, sure, but it also meant extra money, and right now she needed every dollar she could get. Rosa balanced a tray of champagne glasses as she pushed through the service door into the ballroom. The sight always took her breath away, no matter how many times she'd seen it. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen waterfalls, throwing little rainbows across the walls. The tables were covered in white silk, and each one had a centerpiece of roses that probably cost more than her weekly paycheck. The guests were arriving now, and Rosa kept her eyes down as she moved between them. Designer dresses, tailored suits, jewelry that sparkled under the lights. These people lived in a different world. She was just passing through their space, invisible in her black and white server uniform. But then she saw it, and her heart skipped a beat. Right there in the center of the stage sat a grand piano. It wasn't just any piano either. This was a beauty, polished to perfection. Its black surface so shiny it looked like a mirror. The lid was propped open, ready and waiting. Rosa stopped in her tracks, nearly dropping her tray. She forced herself to look away and kept walking. "Don't think about it," she told herself. "That part of your life is over." But her fingers had already started tingling the way they always did when she saw a piano. It was like her hands had a memory of their own, separate from her brain. They remembered the feel of ivory keys, the way they'd sink down under just the right amount of pressure. They remembered chord progressions and scales, the muscle memory built over 15 years of practice. Rosa delivered the champagne glasses to a group of women dripping in diamonds. They didn't even look at her as they took the glasses from her tray. She was furniture to them, just part of the background. Back in the service area, she grabbed another tray. Her coworker Carmen gave her a tired smile. Carmen had 3 kids at home and worked 2 jobs just like Rosa did. They understood each other without having to say much. "You okay?" Carmen asked, noticing Rosa staring off into space. "Yeah, just tired," Rosa lied. She wasn't just tired. She was exhausted in a way that sleep couldn't fix. It was the kind of tired that came from working yourself to the bone for years with no end in sight. The kind that made you forget you ever had dreams bigger than just making it through another month. Rosa grabbed a pitcher of water and headed back out. The ballroom was filling up now. Maybe 300 people, all dressed like they'd stepped out of a magazine. She recognized a few faces from TV, some local celebrities and business people whose names were always in the papers. As she refilled water glasses, she caught glimpses of the piano again. It sat there like a silent invitation, and she had to physically stop herself from walking over to it. What would these people do if a waitress just sat down and started playing? They'd probably call security. The thought almost made her laugh, but there was too much pain wrapped up in it. 10 years ago, Rosa had been on track for something different. She'd grown up with music all around her. Her mother had been a music teacher at a local school, and their small apartment had always been filled with the sound of piano. From the time Rosa was 5 years old, her mother had taught her to play, and Rosa had been good. Really good. Not just the kind of good where parents clap politely at recitals. She'd been the kind of good that made her teachers talk about conservatories and competitions. By the time she was 17, she'd won regional competitions. She'd been applying to music schools, dreaming of a life on stage. Then her mother got sick. Rosa pushed the memory away as she cleared empty plates from a table. This wasn't the time to fall apart. She had a job to do, and she needed this paycheck. Her little brother Diego was starting community college next semester, and she'd promised to help with his books. After her mother died, everything had fallen apart so fast. Her father, who'd never been much help to begin with, had disappeared 6 months later. Just left one day and never came back. At 19, Rosa had suddenly been responsible for her 15-year-old brother. The piano had been the first thing to go. She'd sold it to pay for the funeral and 2 months' rent. Then she'd dropped out of the community college where she'd enrolled, unable to manage classes and full-time work. The acceptance letter from the State Music Conservatory had arrived 3 weeks after her mother's funeral. Rosa had read it once, cried for an hour, then thrown it away. That was 10 years ago. Now Diego was 23, working part-time and going to school. They'd made it work somehow, but there were nights when Rosa lay awake wondering what her life might have been like if things had gone differently. Rosa, "Table 12 needs more wine," her supervisor called out, snapping her back to the present. She grabbed a bottle of red and headed over. The evening was picking up pace now, and she needed to focus. No more daydreaming. No more staring at that piano like it was some kind of portal to a past life. But as she poured wine for a man who didn't bother to say thank you, Rosa's eyes drifted back to the stage one more time. The piano sat there under the spotlight waiting for someone to bring it to life. She wondered who they'd hired to play tonight. Probably some famous pianist flown in from Europe or New York. Someone who'd had all the opportunities Rosa never got. Someone whose mother didn't die, whose father didn't leave, who got to follow their dreams all the way to the end. Rosa felt a familiar ache in her chest, the one that showed up whenever she let herself remember too much. She swallowed it down and got back to work. The night was young, and these people's glasses weren't going to fill themselves. That piano would be played by someone else, someone who belonged in that spotlight, and Rosa would be right where she always was. In the background, invisible and forgotten. At least, that's what she thought would happen. She had no idea that in just a few hours everything was about to change. Part 2. A forgotten dream. Rosa pushed through the service door and leaned against the wall in the back hallway. The noise from the ballroom faded to a dull hum behind her. She closed her eyes and pressed her fingers against her temples, trying to push away the headache that was building behind her eyes. "Hey, you all right?" Carmen appeared beside her, holding an empty tray. Rosa opened her eyes and forced a smile. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just need a minute." Carmen studied her face for a moment. They'd worked together long enough that Carmen could usually tell when something was off. "You sure? You've been acting weird all night. Keep staring at that piano like it owes you money or something." Rosa let out a small laugh despite herself. "It's nothing. Just brings back memories, you know." "You play?" Carmen asked, surprise in her voice. Rosa hesitated. She rarely talked about this part of her life. It felt like talking about a different person, someone who didn't exist anymore. "I used to. A long time ago." "Like how long ago?" "High school?" "Something like that." Rosa straightened up, not wanting to get into it. "We should get back. The supervisor's probably looking for us." But Carmen wasn't ready to drop it. "Come on, don't leave me hanging." "Were you good?" Rosa looked down at her hands. They were rough now from years of washing dishes and carrying heavy trays. But if she looked close enough, she could still see the shape of a pianist's hands underneath. Long fingers, strong wrists. Her mother used to say she had perfect hands for piano. "I was okay," Rosa said quietly. "My mom taught me. She was a music teacher." "Was?" "She passed away." 10 years ago." Carmen's expression softened. "Oh, Rosa, I'm sorry. I didn't know." Rosa shrugged, trying to play it off. "It's fine. It was a long time ago." But it wasn't fine, and it would never be just a long time ago. Some things didn't fade with time. They just learned to hide better. Rosa's mother had been everything to her. Not just a parent, but a best friend, a teacher, a mentor. The woman had lived and breathed music. Their tiny apartment had been cluttered with sheet music and teaching materials. The piano, an old upright that her mother had saved for years to buy, had taken up half their living room. Rosa remembered coming home from school every day to the sound of her mother playing. Sometimes it was classical pieces, Chopin or Mozart. Other times it was jazz, or old songs from movies. Her mother's hands would dance across the keys, and the music would fill every corner of their home. "Come here, mi amor," her mother would call out when she heard Rosa drop her backpack. "Let me show you something beautiful." And Rosa would sit beside her on the piano bench, and her mother would guide her small hands across the keys. "Feel the music," she'd say. "Don't just play the notes. Feel what they're trying to tell you." By the time Rosa was 10, she was playing pieces that kids twice her age struggled with. Her mother would beam with pride at every recital, every small achievement. "You have a gift," she'd tell Rosa, "a real gift. Don't ever waste it." When Rosa was 14, her music teacher at school pulled her aside. "Have you thought about music school? With your talent, you could get into a conservatory. Maybe even with a scholarship." Rosa had run home that day bursting with excitement. Her mother had hugged her so tight she could barely breathe. "I knew it," her mother whispered. "I always knew you were special." They'd started planning then. Rosa would finish high school, apply to conservatories, maybe even audition for competitions. The future had seemed so bright, so full of possibilities. Then came the diagnosis: stage 4 cancer. It had spread before they even knew it was there. Rosa shook her head, pushing the memories away. Carmen was still looking at her with concern. "Your mom would be proud of you," Carmen said softly. "Working hard, taking care of yourself. That's not nothing." Rosa nodded, not trusting herself to speak. If only Carmen knew the whole truth. She wasn't just taking care of herself. After her mother died, her father had stuck around for a few months, but his heart wasn't in it. He'd always been distant, never quite comfortable with the responsibility of being a parent. When the bills started piling up and reality set in, he'd made his choice. Rosa came home from her first day at this hotel job to find a note on the kitchen table. "I can't do this." "I'm sorry. Take care of your brother." That was it. No explanation, no goodbye. Just gone. Diego had only been 15, a sophomore in high school dealing with the loss of his mother, and now the abandonment of his father. Rosa had been 19, barely an adult herself, suddenly responsible for keeping them both afloat. The piano had been the first sacrifice. She'd called a used furniture dealer and sold it for $800. It had been worth more, but she needed cash fast. She'd stood in the empty space where the piano had been and cried for hours. Then came the acceptance letter from the conservatory. Full scholarship based on her audition tape. They wanted her. They believed in her talent. But there was no way she could go. Not with Diego to take care of, rent to pay, bills piling up. She'd thrown the letter away without even responding. That was 10 years ago, but sometimes it felt like yesterday. "Earth to Rosa." Carmen waved a hand in front of her face. "You're doing it again." "Spacing out." "Sorry," Rosa blinked. "Just tired." "Well, suck it up, girl. We've got at least 3 more hours of this." Carmen squeezed her shoulder. "Come on, let's get back before we both get fired." They pushed back through the doors into the ballroom. The place was packed now, everyone seated at their tables, eating appetizers and drinking expensive wine. The noise level had risen, hundreds of conversations blending together into a steady roar. Rosa picked up a tray of empty glasses and started making her rounds. She tried not to look at the piano, but it was impossible. It was right there in the center of the stage, calling to her. She wondered what it would feel like to play again. Would her hands remember? Would the music still be inside her somewhere, waiting to come out? Or had she buried it so deep that it was gone forever? A burst of laughter from a nearby table pulled her attention. A group of older women, all dripping in jewelry and expensive perfume, were looking at their phones and giggling about something. Rosa cleared their plates, invisible as always. As she worked, she thought about Diego. He was probably at home right now studying for his midterms. He wanted to be a teacher, maybe work with kids. He was good, kind, patient. Their mother would have loved that. Rosa had made sure Diego got to follow his dreams, even if she couldn't follow hers. She'd worked double shifts, picked up extra hours, done whatever it took to keep him in school. He'd offered to quit and get a full-time job to help more with the bills, but Rosa had refused. "One of us gets to have a future," she'd told him. "That's you. Don't waste it." Now he was almost done with his associate's degree. Soon he'd transfer to a 4-year school. Maybe then, Rosa thought, maybe then she could think about herself. Maybe she could take a class or two. Maybe she could find a cheap keyboard and start playing again. But who was she kidding? By the time Diego was done with school, she'd be 30-something. Too old to start over. The dream of being a concert pianist, of playing in beautiful halls for audiences who actually wanted to hear her, that dream was dead. It had died the same day her mother did. Rosa carried her tray back to the kitchen, her feet aching worse than before. She caught her reflection in one of the polished silver serving platters. She looked tired, older than 28. The girl who used to dream about playing Carnegie Hall was gone. In her place was a woman who just wanted to make it through another shift. The sound of someone testing the microphone echoed from the ballroom. The program would be starting soon. Some famous pianist would sit at that beautiful piano and play for all these rich people, who probably wouldn't even really listen. And Rosa would be in the background, refilling water glasses and clearing plates, pretending that seeing someone else at that piano didn't hurt like a knife in her chest. She took a deep breath and grabbed another tray. Time to get back to work. Time to forget about dreams that would never come true. But sometimes life has a funny way of surprising you right when you least expect it. Part 3. The famous pianist's absence. The evening was in full swing when Rosa noticed something was off. She'd been weaving through tables, topping off wine glasses and clearing plates, when she saw the event coordinator rushing past her. The woman's face was pale and she was talking rapidly into her phone. Rosa didn't think much of it at first. These big events always had little emergencies. A missing centerpiece, a dietary restriction someone forgot to mention, a microphone that wasn't working. The coordinator, Mrs. Patterson, was always stressed about something. But then Rosa saw Mr. Chen, the hotel manager, hurrying toward the back area where the staff congregated. His normally calm expression was replaced with something close to panic. Rosa had worked at the Grand Meridian for 5 years, and she'd never seen Mr. Chen look panicked about anything. Something was definitely wrong. Rosa was supposed to be serving desserts, but curiosity got the better of her. She set down her tray and drifted closer to the back hallway where she could hear voices. Mrs. Patterson was there, along with Mr. Chen and a few other people Rosa recognized from the event planning team. "This is a disaster," Mrs. Patterson was saying, her voice high and strained. "An absolute disaster. What are we supposed to tell these people?" "Have you tried everyone?" Mr. Chen asked. "There has to be someone available. I've called every pianist in the city. Every single one. It's Saturday night, they're all booked. The symphony has a performance downtown. The university's music department is doing some recital. Even the guys who play at the jazz club are working." Rosa felt her stomach drop. The pianist. Something had happened to the pianist. Another voice chimed in, one of the event assistants. "What about recorded music? We could just play something through the speakers." "Are you kidding me?" Mrs. Patterson sounded like she might cry. "These people paid $5,000 a plate to be here. They were promised a performance by Viktor Kozlov. Do you know who that is? He's played at the Kennedy Center. He's been featured in magazines. And now we're going to play him a recording like this is a high school dance? Viktor Kozlov." Rosa had heard the name. He was famous in the classical music world, a Russian pianist known for his emotional performances. People flew across the country to hear him play. What happened to him? Mr. Chen asked the question Rosa was thinking. Mrs. Patterson let out a frustrated sigh. "Food poisoning. He's at his hotel throwing up everything he's eaten in the last week. His assistant says there's no way he can perform. He can barely stand up. When did you find out?" 20 minutes ago. I've been on the phone nonstop trying to find a replacement." "Nobody's available, nobody." Mrs. Patterson's voice cracked. "This is the charity's biggest fundraiser of the year. The performance is supposed to start in 45 minutes. What are we going to do?" Rosa felt her heart pounding. She should walk away. This wasn't her problem. She should go back to serving desserts and pretend she hadn't heard anything, but her feet wouldn't move. "We'll have to make an announcement," Mr. Chen said slowly. "Apologize, offer refunds if people want them. It's not ideal, but what choice do we have? The charity will be devastated," someone else added. "They're counting on this money. And the hotel's reputation?" Rosa watched Mrs. Patterson put her face in her hands. The woman was tough usually, the kind of person who could handle anything. But this was clearly too much. The group stood there in heavy silence. In the ballroom beyond, Rosa could hear the sound of conversation and laughter. All those people had no idea what was coming. They were expecting an evening of entertainment, a world-class performance. Instead, they were going to get apologies and disappointment. Rosa thought about the piano sitting on that stage. She thought about how it had been calling to her all evening. She thought about her mother's hands guiding hers across the keys. "You have a gift, mi amor. Don't waste it," her mouth went dry. What she was thinking was crazy. Absolutely insane. But her feet were already moving, carrying her toward the group of stressed-out people before her brain could talk her out of it. "Excuse me," Rosa heard herself say. Her voice came out smaller than she had intended. They all turned to look at her. Mrs. Patterson's expression was irritated, like she didn't have time for whatever a server needed to ask her. "Not now," Mrs. Patterson said. "We're dealing with a situation." "I know," Rosa said. "I heard. About the pianist." Mr. Chen's eyes narrowed slightly. "Rosa, this is a private conversation." Rosa swallowed hard. Her hands were shaking, so she clasped them behind her back. I'm sorry for listening, but I think I might be able to help." Mrs. Patterson let out a short, harsh laugh. "Unless you know a concert pianist hiding in the kitchen, I don't think so." This was it. The moment where Rosa could either turn around and go back to being invisible, or she could step forward into something terrifying and unknown. She thought about Diego, about how she'd always told him to go after what he wanted. She thought about her mother, about all those hours of practice and all that wasted potential. She thought about the acceptance letter she'd thrown away and the dreams she'd buried. "I can play," Rosa said. The words hung in the air. Nobody spoke for a moment. Then Mrs. Patterson laughed again, but it was more confused than amused this time. "What? The piano? I can play it. I used to. I mean, I know how to play. You?" Mrs. Patterson looked Rosa up and down, taking in the server uniform, the worn shoes, the tired face. "You play piano?" Rosa felt her cheeks burn. This was a mistake. What had she been thinking? These people weren't going to take her seriously, but Mr. Chen was looking at her differently. He'd always been kind to Rosa, one of the few managers who treated the staff like actual human beings. "How well, Rosa?" he asked quietly. "Well enough," Rosa said, her voice steadier now. "I trained for years. I was supposed to go to music school before things changed." "Music school?" Mrs. Patterson repeated, her tone dripping with skepticism. "Which one?" "The State Conservatory. I had a scholarship." Mrs. Patterson opened her mouth, probably to ask why a girl with a conservatory scholarship was working as a waitress, but Mr. Chen held up a hand. "Can you play classical?" he asked. "Yes. What pieces do you know?" Rosa's mind raced through the hundreds of pieces she'd learned over the years. Chopin, Beethoven, Mozart, some Rachmaninoff, Debussy, a lot of things. Mrs. Patterson shook her head. "This is ridiculous. We can't put a server on stage in front of these people. Do you know who's out there? The mayor is here. The CEO of 3 Fortune 500 companies. We have celebrities, philanthropists, people who know music. They'll know she's not a professional. What other choice do we have?" Mr. Chen asked calmly. "You said yourself nobody else is available. We either cancel the performance, play a recording, or we let her try." "Let her try?" Mrs. Patterson looked at him like he'd lost his mind. "Have you heard her play? Do you have any idea if she's actually any good?" "No," Mr. Chen admitted. "But I know Rosa. She's been working here for 5 years. She's reliable, honest, and she doesn't make things up. If she says she can play, I believe her." Rosa felt a surge of gratitude toward Mr. Chen, even as terror swept through her. What was she doing? She hadn't played in 10 years. What if her hands didn't remember? What if she froze up there in front of all those people? Mrs. Patterson was clearly torn. She looked at her watch, then back at Rosa. "Have you performed before? In front of an audience?" "Yes," Rosa said. "Recitals, competitions. Not for a while, but yes." "Not for a while," Mrs. Patterson muttered. "Great, this is great." "We're running out of time," one of the assistants pointed out. "The program is supposed to start in 35 minutes. Mrs. Patterson closed her eyes, clearly weighing her options. When she opened them, she looked at Rosa with an expression somewhere between desperation and resignation. "Can you play for at least 30 minutes? That's how long the performance slot is." Rosa nodded. "Yes, and you won't freeze up? You won't sit down and forget everything?" "I won't," Rosa said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. Mrs. Patterson turned to Mr. Chen. "If this goes badly, it's on both of us." "I understand," Mr. Chen said. Then Mrs. Patterson looked back at Rosa, her eyes hard. "You better be as good as you say you are. Because if you embarrass us up there, if you make us look like fools, your career at this hotel is over. Do you understand?" Rosa felt like she might throw up, but she nodded. "I understand." "All right," Mrs. Patterson said, the word coming out like a surrender. "Go get ready. And for the love of God, someone find her something better to wear than that uniform." Part 4. An unexpected offer. Rosa stood frozen in the hallway, barely able to process what had just happened. Had she really just volunteered to play piano in front of 300 rich strangers? Had Mr. Chen and Mrs. Patterson actually said yes? "Well, don't just stand there," Mrs. Patterson snapped, already pulling out her phone. "We have 30 minutes. Go wash your hands, splash some water on your face. Meet me backstage in 5 minutes." Rosa nodded and hurried toward the staff bathroom. Her hands were trembling so badly she could barely turn the faucet. She looked at herself in the mirror and almost didn't recognize the person staring back. What had she done? The face in the mirror looked terrified, pale, like someone about to walk to their own execution. Rosa splashed cold water on her face, trying to calm down. Her heart was racing so fast she thought it might burst out of her chest. She dried her hands carefully, flexing her fingers. They were stiff from carrying trays all day. She tried a few quick scales in the air, moving her fingers like she was playing invisible keys. The muscle memory was there, buried under 10 years of neglect, but she could feel it stirring. Please, she thought, not even sure who she was praying to. Please let me remember. Please don't let me fail. When she got backstage, she found Mrs. Patterson waiting with 2 other women Rosa vaguely recognized from the hotel's events team. They were holding what looked like a simple black dress on a hanger. "Put this on," Mrs. Patterson ordered, thrusting the dress at Rosa. "It's from the Lost and Found. Someone left it after a wedding last month. It should fit." Rosa took the dress and ducked behind a screen to change. Her fingers fumbled with the buttons of her uniform. The black dress was simple but elegant, falling just below her knees. It fit reasonably well, a little loose in the waist but acceptable. It was the nicest thing Rosa had worn in years. When she emerged, one of the other women immediately attacked her hair, pulling it out of its practical ponytail and arranging it into something more presentable. Another woman dabbed powder on Rosa's face and added a touch of lipstick. "Not bad," Mrs. Patterson said, circling Rosa like she was inspecting a product. "You'll do." Through the curtain, Rosa could hear the sound of the crowd. Conversations, laughter, the clink of glasses. So many people. She felt dizzy. "Listen to me." Mrs. Patterson grabbed Rosa by the shoulders, her grip surprisingly strong. "I'm going to go out there and make an announcement about the original performer being ill. I'm going to tell them we have a surprise replacement. I won't mention that you're a server. I'll just say you're a talented young pianist, got it?" Rosa nodded, not trusting her voice. "You walk out there with your head up. You don't apologize, you don't explain, you just sit down and play. Make them forget they were expecting someone famous. Can you do that?" Could she? Rosa had no idea, but she said yes. "Good." Mrs. Patterson released her shoulders and straightened Rosa's dress. "What are you going to play?" "I need to know for the announcement." Rosa's mind went blank for a moment. Then, like a gift from somewhere deep in her memory, her mother's voice came back to her. "When you're scared, mi amor, play what you love. Play what's in your heart. Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major," Rosa said. "Then maybe some Rachmaninoff." "And Debussy," Mrs. Patterson nodded. "Classical. Safe choice." "All right. Wait here until I call you." The woman disappeared through the curtain and Rosa was left standing alone in the wings. She could see a sliver of the ballroom through a gap in the curtain. The piano sat center stage, lit by a spotlight, waiting. Rosa closed her eyes and tried to steady her breathing. She thought about the last time she'd performed in front of an audience. She'd been 17, playing in a regional competition. Her mother had been in the front row, beaming with pride. Rosa had played perfectly that day, won second place, gone home feeling like she could conquer the world. That girl felt like a stranger now. Through the curtain, she heard Mrs. Patterson's voice on the microphone. "Good evening, everyone. I hope you're all enjoying your dinner. I have a brief announcement to make about this evening's musical performance." The crowd noise died down. Rosa's heart hammered against her ribs. "Unfortunately, our scheduled performer, the renowned Viktor Kozlov, has fallen ill and is unable to join us tonight." A ripple of disappointed murmurs ran through the crowd. However, Mrs. Patterson continued, her voice brightening artificially, "We are fortunate to have found a wonderful replacement. Please join me in welcoming a talented young pianist who will be performing for us this evening." That was Rosa's cue. She stepped toward the curtain, but her feet felt like they were made of lead. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to hide, to go back to being invisible. But then she thought about Diego. She thought about all the times she'd told him to be brave, to take chances, to not let fear stop him from trying. How could she ask that of him if she couldn't do it herself? She thought about her mother, about all those hours of practice, all those dreams they'd shared. "Don't waste your gift," her mother had said. Rosa took a deep breath and stepped through the curtain. The ballroom stretched out before her like an ocean. Hundreds of faces turned toward her, some curious, some confused, some already looking skeptical. The spotlight was blinding. For a moment, Rosa couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Then she saw Mr. Chen standing near the back. He gave her a small nod, an encouraging smile. "You can do this," his expression seemed to say. Rosa walked toward the piano. Her legs felt shaky, but she kept moving. She was aware of the whispers starting, could feel the weight of all those eyes on her. She heard someone say loud enough for others to hear, "Who is this? I've never heard of her." Another voice, a woman's, sounding annoyed. "This is what they're replacing Viktor Kozlov with?" Rosa's cheeks burned, but she kept walking. When she reached the piano bench, she smoothed her dress and sat down carefully. The piano was beautiful up close, the keys perfectly white and black, gleaming under the lights. She adjusted the bench, positioned her hands over the keys, and that's when she heard it. A woman somewhere in the front rows, her voice dripping with disdain, loud enough for half the room to hear. "Is this a joke?" Rosa's hands froze. The cruel laughter that followed felt like a slap across the face. She wanted to stand up and run off the stage. She wanted to disappear into the floor. But then in her mind she heard her mother's voice again. Not the gentle teaching voice, but the fierce one. The one that came out when someone told Rosa she couldn't do something. "Show them, mi amor. Show them what you're made of." Rosa placed her fingers on the keys. She could feel the smooth ivory under her fingertips, cool and familiar. The muscle memory was still there, waiting to be awakened. She closed her eyes, took one more deep breath, and began to play. The first notes of Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major floated out into the ballroom. Soft, delicate, like a whisper in the dark. And just like that, the whisper stopped. Rosa felt something shift inside her as she played. It was like coming home after a long journey. Her fingers remembered every note, every nuance, every subtle shift in dynamics. The years fell away, and suddenly she was back in her mother's apartment, playing for an audience of one, pouring her heart into the music. The Nocturne was a piece about night, about beauty and darkness, about hope and loneliness. Rosa had played it 100 times as a teenager, but it had never meant as much as it did right now. She could feel the attention of the room shift. The skepticism gave way to curiosity, then to something else, something that felt like respect. Rosa's eyes were still closed, but she could sense it. The way the room had gone completely silent, the way even the servers had stopped moving. Everyone was listening now, really listening, and Rosa kept playing, her hands dancing across the keys, telling a story without words. A story about loss and survival, about buried dreams and unexpected second chances, about a girl who never stopped being a pianist, even when she had to pretend to be something else. When she transitioned into the next piece, Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C-sharp minor, she felt power surge through her. This was a darker piece, more dramatic, full of passion and intensity. Her hands flew across the keys, attacking the notes with a confidence she didn't know she still had. She was no longer the scared waitress in a borrowed dress. She was a musician, and this was her moment. The room had completely vanished around her. There was only Rosa and the piano and the music flowing between them. And for the first time in 10 years, Rosa felt truly alive. Part 5. The performance that changed everything. Rosa's fingers moved across the keys like they'd never stopped. The Rachmaninoff piece demanded everything from her, technically challenging passages that would make even experienced pianists nervous. But Rosa wasn't thinking about technique anymore. She was feeling the music, letting it flow through her like water through a river. She'd forgotten how this felt, the pure joy of it, the way music could take everything inside you, all the pain and fear and hope, and transform it into something beautiful, something that could touch other people's hearts. As she played, memories flooded back, not just of her mother, but of who Rosa herself used to be. The girl who would practice for hours until her hands cramped. The teenager who would get lost in a piece, playing the same section over and over until it was perfect. The young woman who believed music could change the world. That girl was still inside her. She'd just been sleeping. The Rachmaninoff built to a powerful climax, Rosa's hands stretching across the keys, her whole body engaged in the performance. She could feel sweat forming on her forehead, could feel her heart racing, but it wasn't from fear anymore. It was from pure adrenaline, from the rush of doing something she was meant to do. When the final chord rang out, Rosa held it, letting it sustain and fade naturally. Only then did she open her eyes and she realized the entire room was holding its breath. She could see faces now, no longer a blur of strangers. A woman in the front row had tears streaming down her face. An older man was leaning forward in his seat, completely transfixed. Even the servers who'd been her co-workers an hour ago were standing still, trays forgotten, watching her with expressions of shock. Rosa didn't pause. She transitioned smoothly into Debussy's Clair de Lune. If the Rachmaninoff had been fire, this was water. Gentle, flowing, dreamlike. The notes seemed to shimmer in the air like moonlight on a lake. This had been one of her mother's favorite pieces. She used to play it on Sunday mornings while Rosa made breakfast. "Listen to how it moves," her mother would say. "It's like the music is breathing." Rosa let it breathe now. She played with a delicacy that surprised even herself. Each note placed with care, building a world of sound that wrapped around the audience like a soft blanket. She could see people in the crowd swaying slightly, lost in the music. The mayor's wife had closed her eyes. A group of businessmen who'd probably been talking about stock portfolios 10 minutes ago were completely silent. Absorbed, Rosa had worried that she'd be rusty, that 10 years away from the piano would show, but somehow it was the opposite. All those years of struggle, all that pain and loss had given her something she didn't have as a teenager. She had depth now, she had life experience, and it poured into her playing, making it richer, more meaningful. She moved through piece after piece, drawing on her vast repertoire. A bit of Mozart for lightness, some Bach for structure and beauty. Then back to Chopin, this time the more dramatic Ballad No. 1 in G minor. Time seemed to stop. Rosa had no idea how long she'd been playing. 20 minutes, 40? It didn't matter. She was in a state of flow, that magical place where everything felt effortless and right. When she finally played her last piece, she chose something unexpected. It was a jazz arrangement her mother had taught her, a blend of classical technique with American jazz harmonies. It was playful, surprising, showing a different side of her abilities. As the final notes faded away, Rosa lifted her hands from the keys and sat back. Her shoulders ached. Her hands were tired, but she felt incredible, like she'd just run a marathon and crossed the finish line. For a moment, there was absolute silence. Rosa's heart sank. Had she done something wrong? Had they hated it? She looked out at the sea of faces, trying to read their expressions. Then it started. One person began clapping. Then another. Then suddenly the entire room erupted in applause. But it wasn't polite applause, the kind people give out of obligation. This was thunderous, genuine, coming from 300 people who just experienced something they hadn't expected. People were standing up. The whole room was on its feet, giving her a standing ovation. The sound was deafening, overwhelming. Rosa saw Carmen in the back, crying and clapping so hard her hands must have hurt. Mr. Chen was smiling wider than she'd ever seen, nodding with something that looked like pride. Even Mrs. Patterson, the skeptical event coordinator, was applauding, though she looked slightly dazed, like she couldn't quite believe what had just happened. Rosa stood up from the piano bench, her legs shaky. She gave a small bow, not quite sure what else to do. The applause continued, wave after wave of it. Some people were cheering. Someone whistled. The woman in the front row who'd been crying stood up and shouted, "Brava! Brava!" Rosa felt tears prick her own eyes. She'd performed many times in her youth, but she'd never received a response like this. This wasn't just appreciation for technical skill. These people had felt something. She'd reached them, touched something deep inside them. As she walked off the stage, her legs barely supporting her, Mrs. Patterson met her in the wings. The woman looked at Rosa like she was seeing her for the first time. That was... Mrs. Patterson seemed unable to find words. That was extraordinary. Rosa couldn't speak. The emotions were too big, too overwhelming. She'd done it. She'd actually done it. Mr. Chen appeared beside them, beaming. "I knew you had it in you, Rosa, I knew it." But the applause wasn't stopping. If anything, it was getting louder. Rosa peeked back through the curtain and saw people still standing, still clapping, some calling for an encore. "They want more," Mrs. Patterson said, sounding amazed. "You need to go back out there. What should I play?" Rosa asked. "Anything. Play whatever you want. Just go." Rosa walked back onto the stage, and the applause somehow grew even louder. She returned to the piano, sat down, and without thinking too hard about it, began to play. This time she chose something from the heart, a simple folk song her mother used to sing to her when she was little, arranged for piano. It was nothing fancy, not technically difficult, but it was pure emotion. Pure love. As she played, Rosa finally let herself cry. The tears ran down her face, but her hands never faltered. She played through the blur, played through the overwhelming rush of feelings. When she finished, the room erupted again. This time when Rosa stood up, she smiled. A real, genuine smile that felt like it might split her face in two. She bowed again and walked off the stage. This time for good. Backstage, several people swarmed her. Mrs. Patterson was talking rapidly about the charity and how much this meant to them. Mr. Chen was patting her shoulder. Other hotel staff members she barely knew were congratulating her, looking at her with new eyes. Carmen pushed through the crowd and hugged Rosa tight. "Girl, where have you been hiding that? Oh my God, I can't believe you've been serving tables when you can play like that." Rosa hugged her back, still crying, still overwhelmed. But then she saw something that made her pause. Several people in the crowd were holding up their phones pointed toward the stage. They'd been recording. Some were still recording, capturing the chaos backstage. Rosa felt a small flutter of worry, but she pushed it aside. Let them record. Let them share it. For tonight, just for tonight, she wanted to enjoy this moment without worrying about what came next. She'd stepped out of the shadows and into the light. She'd reclaimed the part of herself she'd buried for so long. She'd played piano again, and it had been everything she'd dreamed it would be. The scared waitress in the borrowed dress had walked onto that stage, but it was a pianist who had walked off. And somewhere, Rosa thought, her mother was smiling, whispering the words she'd said so many times. "I knew it, mi amor. I always knew you were special." As the crowd in the ballroom continued to buzz with excitement, as the charity organizers celebrated what was turning into the most memorable gala they'd ever hosted, Rosa stood backstage and finally let herself believe it too. She was special. She was talented. And maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late for dreams to come true after all. But Rosa had no idea that outside the ballroom, beyond the walls of the Grand Meridian Hotel, something was already happening. Those phone recordings were being uploaded, shared, sent across the internet. And by morning, everything was going to change in ways Rosa couldn't possibly imagine. Part 6. The viral sensation. Rosa didn't sleep much that night. She got home around midnight. Her borrowed dress carefully folded in a bag, her regular clothes back on. Diego was still up studying at their small kitchen table. "How was work?" he asked without looking up from his textbook. Rosa opened her mouth to tell him everything that had happened, but the words felt too big, too impossible. "It was good," she said instead. "Really good." She'd tell him tomorrow, she decided, when she could explain it better, when it all felt more real. Rosa fell into bed exhausted, but her mind wouldn't stop racing. She kept seeing the faces in the crowd, hearing the applause, feeling the keys under her fingers. Had it really happened? Or had she dreamed the whole thing? She finally fell asleep around 3 in the morning, her hands still unconsciously moving through the finger positions of the pieces she'd played. Her phone woke her at 7:30. It was buzzing, vibrating against her nightstand like an angry bee. Rosa groaned and reached for it, squinting at the screen. 17 missed calls, 43 text messages. Her social media notifications were going crazy, numbers climbing even as she watched. What in the world? Still half asleep, Rosa opened her messages. Most were from numbers she didn't recognize, but there was one from Carmen sent 2 hours ago. "Rosa, check Instagram! You're everywhere!" Rosa's heart started to beat faster. She opened Instagram, and her breath caught in her throat. The top video on her feed was from the gala. Someone had recorded her performance and posted it with the caption, "Unknown waitress delivers the performance of a lifetime at charity gala." Who is this woman? The video had been viewed over 2 million times. 2 million. And it had been posted less than 12 hours ago. Rosa sat up in bed, suddenly wide awake. Her hands shook as she scrolled through the comments. "This gave me chills. I'm literally crying. This is the most beautiful thing I've heard in years. Someone sign her to a record label now. The way she plays with such emotion. You can feel every note." Rosa clicked on more videos. Different angles, different parts of her performance. One showed her walking onto the stage looking terrified. Another captured the moment the crowd gave her a standing ovation. Every single video had hundreds of thousands of views, some over 1 million. Her phone rang. An unknown number. Rosa stared at it, not sure whether to answer. She declined the call. Immediately, another call came through. "Different number, Diego." Rosa called out, her voice shaky. Her brother appeared in the doorway, already dressed for his shift at the coffee shop where he worked part-time. What's wrong? Something happened last night. At the gala. I played piano. Diego's eyebrows shot up. You what? You haven't played in years, I know. But they needed someone, and I volunteered, and... Rosa held up her phone, showing him the videos. People recorded it. It's everywhere. Diego took the phone, his eyes widening as he scrolled. Rosa, holy... This has millions of views. Millions. You're famous. I'm not famous, Rosa said automatically. It's just... People like feel-good stories. It'll blow over. But even as she said it, her phone kept buzzing. More calls, more messages, more notifications. Diego handed back her phone, looking stunned. You need to read these comments. People are sharing your story everywhere. There are articles being written about you. Articles? Rosa pulled up her browser and searched her name. He was right. News websites, entertainment blogs, music magazines. They were all covering the story. Mystery pianist stuns elite crowd. From serving tables to standing ovations. The waitress who might be the next classical music star. One article from a major news outlet had already tracked down information about her. They'd found her social media, her work history at the hotel. They'd even located an old photo from a high school piano competition she'd won years ago. Rosa felt dizzy. This was too much, too fast. Her phone rang again. This time it was a number she recognized. The Grand Meridian Hotel. With shaking hands, she answered. Hello? Rosa? Finally. It was Mrs. Patterson, the event coordinator, and she sounded almost hysterical. Have you seen what's happening? The phone here has been ringing off the hook since 6 this morning. News stations want interviews. Record labels are calling. Someone from Good Morning America wants to book you for tomorrow's show. Good Morning America? Rosa couldn't process this. That's national television, yes. And that's not all. The charity raised twice as much money as expected last night because of your performance. Donors who weren't even there are calling to contribute after seeing the videos online. You're a phenomenon, Rosa. Rosa sat down on her bed, her legs suddenly weak. I don't understand. It was just one performance. It wasn't just one performance, Mrs. Patterson said, her voice intense. It was a moment. A real, genuine moment of talent and emotion that people connected with. In this age of manufactured everything, you were authentic. And people are desperate for that. After Rosa hung up, the calls kept coming. Talent agents, music producers, a classical music management company, even a representative from a streaming service that wanted to feature her. Diego sat beside her on the bed, watching in amazement as Rosa's phone continued its relentless buzzing. What are you going to do? I have no idea, Rosa whispered. By noon, the video had passed 5 million views. By 3 o'clock, it was 10 million. News segments were featuring it. A famous pop singer had shared it with her 50 million followers, saying it was the most moving performance she'd seen in years. Rosa's Instagram following had gone from 200 people, mostly co-workers and high school friends, to over 50,000. And it kept climbing. Carmen called, breathless with excitement. The hotel is a zoo right now. There are reporters outside trying to get interviews with anyone who saw you perform. Mr. Chen had to hire security. This is insane. Rosa spent the rest of the day in a daze, trying to respond to the most important messages while ignoring the overwhelming flood of attention. She accepted an interview request from a local news station, figuring she should probably say something publicly before the story got too out of control. The interview was scheduled for the next day, and Rosa spent the evening trying to prepare. What was she supposed to say? How could she explain 10 years of her life in a soundbite? But the internet wasn't waiting for her to be ready. People had started digging into her story, finding details, piecing together her past. Someone found the old acceptance letter from the music conservatory mentioned in a school newspaper article. Others discovered her mother's obituary and put the pieces together. The narrative was already being written without her. Talented girl loses mother, gives up dreams to raise younger brother, secretly serves the wealthy elite before stunning them with her hidden gift. It was accurate, but it felt strange seeing her life reduced to headlines and social media posts. That night, as Rosa tried to sleep, she checked the view count one more time. 20 million views. The original video had been shared over 500,000 times. She thought about her mother, about what she would say if she could see this. Would she be proud? Would she tell Rosa to seize this opportunity? To not let it slip through her fingers like she'd let everything else slip away? Rosa's phone lit up with another notification. This one made her heart stop. It was an email from the conductor of a major symphony orchestra. The subject line read, "An opportunity you won't want to miss." Rosa opened it with trembling hands. The conductor had seen her video. He was putting together a special concert series featuring emerging classical talent. He wanted Rosa to be the opening performer. It would be broadcast on television, recorded for streaming platforms, and attended by some of the most influential people in the classical music world. "This is the kind of opportunity that can launch a career," the email said. "Please consider carefully. This could change your life." Rosa read the email 3 times, then looked around her tiny bedroom. The same bedroom she'd lived in for 10 years, working double shifts, putting her dreams on hold, being invisible. She thought about the woman she'd been yesterday morning. The waitress with tired feet and rough hands, who'd taught herself to stop wanting more because wanting hurt too much. Then she thought about the woman who'd walked onto that stage. The one who'd taken a terrifying risk and played her heart out in front of strangers. The one who'd remembered, even if just for an hour, who she really was. Diego knocked softly on her door. "You okay?" Rosa looked up at her brother. He'd grown so much, was almost done with his degree. He didn't need her to sacrifice everything anymore. "Diego," she said slowly, "what if I said yes to some of these opportunities? What if I actually tried to do this, to be a musician?" Diego smiled, and there were tears in his eyes. "Then I'd say it's about time. Mom would be so proud of you, Rosa. And I'm proud of you too." Rosa looked back at the email, at the impossible opportunity sitting in her inbox. The scared part of her wanted to delete it, to go back to being invisible where it was safe. But the pianist in her, the one who'd been sleeping for 10 years, was wide awake now. And she was ready to play. Rosa hit reply and began to type. "Thank you for this incredible opportunity. I would be honored to accept." She pressed send before she could change her mind. Outside her window, the city sparkled with lights. Somewhere out there, millions of people were watching her video, sharing her story, believing in her. Part 7. Facing the music. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur that Rosa could barely keep up with. One day she was a waitress, and the next she was sitting across from a talent manager in a downtown office, signing contracts she'd never imagined she'd see. The manager's name was Patricia, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and an even sharper business sense. She'd represented several classical musicians who'd crossed over into mainstream success, and she seemed genuinely excited about Rosa's potential. "You have something special," Patricia told her during their first meeting. "It's not just the technical skill, though that's impressive. It's the story. People connect with authenticity, and your journey is as real as it gets." Rosa signed with Patricia, feeling like she was signing away one life and stepping into another. The woman immediately got to work, booking interviews, arranging practice sessions with accomplished pianists, and preparing Rosa for the symphony performance that would happen in 2 months. 2 months? Rosa had gasped when she heard the timeline. "That's so soon." "In this business, we strike while the iron is hot," Patricia said. "Right now, people care about you. We need to give them more before they move on to the next viral sensation." It was harsh but true. Rosa had seen how quickly internet fame could fade. She'd have one shot at this, and she couldn't waste it. The first interview was with the local news station, filmed in their studio downtown. Rosa wore a simple dress that Diego helped her pick out from a thrift store. She couldn't afford much yet, despite all the attention. The interviewer was a kind woman named Jennifer who'd done her homework. She asked Rosa about her mother, about the years of struggle, about what it felt like to step onto that stage. Rosa tried to be honest without falling apart on camera. "I'd buried that part of myself for so long," she said, her voice shaking slightly. Playing again felt like coming back to life. The interview aired that evening and was viewed over 1 million times online within hours. People loved her humility, her genuine emotion. The comments were overwhelmingly supportive, though Rosa tried not to read too many. Patricia had warned her that not everyone would be kind. She was right. There were critics too. Some people in the classical music world were skeptical. "She's technically proficient but lacks proper training," one concert pianist wrote on social media. "Viral fame doesn't equal genuine artistry." Another critic was harsher. The classical music establishment shouldn't lower its standards just because someone has a sad backstory in a viral video. The words stung, even though Rosa tried to ignore them. They echoed her own deepest fears. What if she wasn't good enough? What if she embarrassed herself at the symphony performance? Patricia noticed Rosa's anxiety during one of their meetings. "Listen to me," she said firmly. "Critics are going to criticize. That's their job. Your job is to play. Can you do that?" "I think so," Rosa said. "But I'm scared. I haven't had proper training in 10 years. These people are right. I'm rusty." "Then we fix that," Patricia said simply. That's when she introduced Rosa to Antonio Ramirez, a renowned pianist and teacher who'd agreed to work with Rosa to prepare for the symphony performance. Antonio was in his 70s, a legend in classical music circles. Rosa had listened to his recordings as a teenager, had studied his interpretations of the great composers. Now he was sitting at a piano beside her, listening to her play, offering guidance. He was demanding but patient. He pushed Rosa hard, making her repeat passages until they were perfect, breaking down pieces measure by measure, teaching her nuances she'd never considered. "You have raw talent," Antonio told her after their first session. "Significant raw talent. But talent without discipline is just potential. We're going to turn this potential into something real." Rosa practiced every day, sometimes for 8 hours straight. Her fingers ached. Her back hurt from sitting at the piano bench for so long, but she pushed through it. Diego would come home from his classes to find Rosa still at the keyboard they'd rented, her eyes tired but determined. "You need to eat," he'd say, putting a plate of food beside her. "In a minute," Rosa would reply, not stopping her practice. "I almost have this section down." The Grand Meridian Hotel had been generous, giving Rosa a leave of absence to pursue this opportunity. Mr. Chen had even written her a recommendation letter, which Patricia said could help with future opportunities. But money was tight. Rosa wasn't earning anything yet, and the expenses were adding up. The rented keyboard, new clothes for appearances, travel costs for meetings. Patricia had advanced her some money against future earnings, but Rosa hated being in debt. "This is an investment," Diego reminded her when he saw her worrying over bills. "Mom saved for years to give you opportunities. Let me help now. I can pick up extra shifts." "You need to focus on school," Rosa protested. "And you need to focus on music," Diego shot back. "We're a team, remember? We've always been a team." Rosa hugged her brother tight, grateful beyond words. As the weeks passed, the internet attention began to shift. Rosa gained more followers, but the initial viral frenzy was starting to cool. Some people moved on to other stories, other sensations. Rosa tried not to let it bother her, but she felt the pressure mounting. The symphony performance was her chance to prove she was more than just a viral moment. It was her chance to show she belonged in the classical music world, not just as a feel-good story, but as a real artist. Antonio could sense her stress. During one particularly difficult practice session, where Rosa kept making mistakes on a piece she'd played perfectly the day before, he stopped her. "What are you thinking about when you play?" he asked. "The notes, the technique." "Not making mistakes," Rosa admitted. "Wrong answer," Antonio said gently. "You're thinking about everything except the music. You're playing scared, trying not to fail instead of trying to succeed. Do you know the difference?" Rosa nodded, tears forming in her eyes. What if I'm not good enough? What if everyone realizes I don't belong here?" Antonio was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Let me tell you a story. When I was your age, I was already performing with major orchestras. I had the training, the credentials, all the things you think you're missing. But I was playing like a machine, technically perfect but emotionally empty. It took me years to learn what you already know, how to play with heart." He gestured at the piano. "That night at the Gala, you weren't thinking about proving anything. You were just playing, pouring yourself into the music. That's what made it special. Don't lose that by worrying about what critics think." His words helped, but the fear didn't completely go away. Rosa continued to practice obsessively, determined to be as prepared as possible. The symphony performance was scheduled for a Friday evening. It would be held at the city's premier concert hall, a beautiful venue that seated 2,000 people. Tickets had sold out within hours of going on sale, which both thrilled and terrified Rosa. Patricia arranged for Rosa to do a few smaller performances in the weeks leading up to the big night. a performance at a local music school, a benefit concert for a children's charity. These went well, building Rosa's confidence and giving her practice performing in front of audiences again. But she knew the symphony performance was different. There would be television cameras, streaming platforms broadcasting it live, music critics from major publications in attendance. This was the moment that would define whether she had a real career or was just a flash in the pan. 1 week before the performance, Rosa had a panic attack during practice. Her hands started shaking so badly she couldn't play. Her breath came in short gasps. Antonio calmly talked her through it, helping her slow her breathing, reminding her to focus on the present moment. "You're already good enough," he told her when she'd calmed down. "You just need to believe it." That night, Rosa called Diego from the practice studio. "What if I can't do this?" she asked, her voice small. "You can," Diego said with absolute certainty. "You already did it once. You walked onto that stage with no preparation and blew everyone away. This time you've practiced for weeks. You've trained with one of the best pianists in the world. You're ready, Rosa. You just have to trust yourself." 3 days before the performance, a package arrived at Rosa's apartment. Inside was a beautiful concert dress, elegant and professional, along with a note from Patricia. "You're not a waitress in a borrowed dress anymore. You're a pianist. Look the part." Rosa tried on the dress and looked at herself in the mirror. The woman staring back at her looked like someone who belonged on a concert stage. Not because of the dress, but because of the strength in her eyes, the determination in her jaw. She'd come so far in such a short time, from invisible server to viral sensation, to serious musician training for the performance of her life. The scared girl who'd almost run off the stage at the gala was still there, somewhere inside her. But she was quieter now, overshadowed by the pianist who'd been waiting 10 years for a second chance. Rosa turned away from the mirror and went back to the piano. She had 3 days left to prepare. 3 days to make sure she was ready for the moment that could change everything. She sat down at the keys, took a deep breath, and began to play. The day of the symphony performance arrived with unseasonably warm weather. Rosa woke early, her stomach in knots. Diego was already up making breakfast in their tiny kitchen. "You need to eat," he said, sliding scrambled eggs and toast in front of her. Rosa picked at the food, managing only a few bites. "I'm too nervous." "You're going to be amazing," Diego said, sitting across from her. "Mom would be so proud right now. You know that, right?" Rosa felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them away. "I wish she could be there." "She will be," Diego said softly. "Every time you play, she's there." The hours before the performance crawled by. Patricia picked Rosa up at 4 o'clock, bringing her to the concert hall early for sound check and rehearsal with the symphony orchestra. The conductor, Daniel Chen, was a tall man with gray hair and a commanding presence. He greeted Rosa warmly. "I've been looking forward to this. Your viral performance was quite something." The rehearsal went well, though Rosa was stiff with nerves. The orchestra was professional and supportive, but she could feel the weight of their expectations. These were accomplished musicians who'd spent years perfecting their craft. What must they think of her, this waitress who'd stumbled into their world? After rehearsal, Rosa was taken to a private dressing room. Patricia had arranged for a professional stylist to do her hair and makeup. As Rosa sat in the chair, watching herself transform in the mirror, she felt disconnected from reality. "You look beautiful," the stylist said, finishing the final touches. "Absolutely stunning." Rosa stared at her reflection. The woman in the mirror looked confident, elegant, like she belonged on that stage. If only the woman felt the same way. At 6:30, Rosa put on her concert dress. Patricia came in to check on her. "The house is packed," she said. "Standing room only." There are celebrities in the audience, music industry executives, critics from every major publication. And it's being live-streamed to over 50 countries. Rosa felt like she might throw up. "That's not helping." Patricia laughed. "Sorry, I'm just excited. This is a huge moment." She placed her hands on Rosa's shoulders. "But forget about all of them. Just play like you did that night at the gala. Play from your heart." At 7 o'clock, Rosa stood in the wings of the stage, listening to the murmur of the crowd settling into their seats. She peeked through the curtain and saw the massive concert hall filled with people. The grand piano sat center stage, gleaming under the lights. Her hands were shaking. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Then she saw them. Diego was in the 3rd row. dressed in a suit she didn't know he owned. Beside him was Carmen, her coworker from the hotel, wiping tears from her eyes even though the performance hadn't started yet. Mr. Chen was there too, along with several other staff from the Grand Meridian. Antonio sat near the front, his expression calm and encouraging. He caught her eye and gave her a small nod. "You can do this." The lights dimmed. Conductor Daniel Chen walked onto the stage to thunderous applause. He said a few words about the evening's program, then introduced Rosa. "Our guest soloist tonight is a remarkable young woman whose journey has inspired millions. She reminds us that talent can emerge from the most unexpected places, and that it's never too late to pursue your dreams. Please welcome Rosa Mendez." Rosa walked onto the stage. The applause was deafening, but it felt distant, muted. She was aware of her feet moving, of the bright lights, of the thousands of eyes on her, but it all felt surreal. She reached the piano and sat down. The bench felt familiar now after weeks of practice. She adjusted her position, placed her hands on the keys, and took a deep breath. For a moment, panic seized her. Her mind went blank. She couldn't remember the first note, couldn't remember anything. Then, like a whisper in her mind, she heard her mother's voice. "Feel the music, mi amor. Don't just play the notes. Feel what they're trying to tell you." Rosa closed her eyes and let her hands find the keys. She was playing Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, one of the most beloved and challenging pieces in the classical repertoire. It was ambitious, maybe too ambitious for someone with her limited recent experience, but it was the piece that spoke to her heart, the piece that told her story. The opening chords rang out, powerful and dramatic. The symphony joined in behind her, and suddenly Rosa wasn't alone anymore. She was part of something larger, her piano voice blending with the orchestra in a musical conversation. The first movement was all passion and intensity. Rosa's hands flew across the keys, attacking the most difficult passages with a confidence she didn't know she possessed. The muscle memory was there, reinforced by weeks of practice, but it was more than that. She was playing with purpose, with emotion, with the weight of 10 years of buried dreams pouring out through her fingers. The second movement was gentler, more introspective. This was the heart of the piece, the quiet moments of beauty between the storms. Rosa played with a delicacy that brought tears to eyes throughout the audience. This movement was about loss, about loneliness, about the ache of missing someone who would never come back. As she played, Rosa thought about her mother, about all those hours at the piano together, about the dreams they'd shared, about the cruel unfairness of losing her so young. But she also thought about survival, about the strength it took to keep going when everything fell apart, about Diego and how they'd managed to build a life from the ruins. The third movement built to a triumphant climax. This was about hope, about resurrection, about refusing to give up. Rosa's whole body was engaged now, swaying with the music, her hands stretching across the keys in the most demanding passages. She wasn't thinking about the audience anymore, wasn't thinking about the cameras or the critics or the weight of expectations. There was only the music flowing through her like a river, carrying away all her fears and doubts. The final chords rang out, powerful and definitive. Rosa held them, letting them sustain, feeling the vibration of the piano beneath her hands, the orchestra swelling behind her in a magnificent crescendo. Then silence. For one perfect moment, the entire concert hall held its breath. Then the applause began. But it wasn't just applause. It was an eruption, a tidal wave of sound. 2,000 people were on their feet, clapping, cheering, some crying openly. Rosa stood up from the piano bench, her legs shaky. She looked out at the sea of faces and saw Diego jumping up and down, his face split in a huge grin. Carmen was sobbing. Mr. Chen was clapping so hard his hands must have hurt. Antonio was standing too, a rare smile on his usually serious face. He placed his hand over his heart and nodded at her. Approval, recognition, respect. Conductor Daniel Chen came over and embraced her, whispering, "That was extraordinary. Absolutely extraordinary." Rosa took her bows, the applause continuing wave after wave. She'd done it. She'd faced her fears, put herself out there, and delivered. She wasn't just a viral sensation anymore. She was a musician, a real artist who'd earned her place on that stage. The next few hours passed in a blur of congratulations. People swarmed her backstage, offering praise, business cards, opportunities. Patricia was fielding offers right and left, her phone glued to her ear. But Rosa found Diego in the chaos and hugged him tight. We did it, she whispered. You and me. We made it. You did it, Diego corrected. This was all you. The reviews came in over the next few days, and they were overwhelmingly positive. Even the critics who'd been skeptical before had to admit that Rosa had proven herself. One prominent classical music critic wrote, Rosa Mendez doesn't just play the notes. She lives them. Her technical skill is impressive, but her emotional depth is what sets her apart. This is an artist to watch. The streaming numbers were astronomical. Millions of people watched the performance online. Rosa's social media following exploded again, but this time it felt different. These weren't just people interested in a viral moment. These were genuine music fans who appreciated her artistry. Patricia called with more news each day. A recording contract with a major classical music label, an invitation to perform at prestigious venues across the country, interest from international orchestras, even talk of a documentary about her journey. Rosa said yes to the recording contract, yes to the touring opportunities, yes to sharing her story in the hopes it might inspire others who'd given up on their dreams. But she also made sure to protect time for the things that mattered. Diego's graduation from community college, which happened 3 weeks after her symphony performance, dinner with Carmen and the old crew from the hotel, laughing and sharing stories like old times. 6 months after that night at the Gala, Rosa stood in a recording studio in New York City, preparing to record her first album. She was dressed in comfortable clothes, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. No fancy dress, no stage lights, just Rosa and a piano and music waiting to be made. Before she began, she took a moment to look at the framed photo she'd brought with her. It was an old picture of her mother sitting at their old upright piano, her hands on the keys, smiling at the camera. This is for you, Mom, Rosa whispered, for believing in me when I was too young to know what a gift that was, for teaching me to love music, for showing me that dreams matter. She sat down at the piano and placed her hands on the keys. They were strong hands now, practiced and confident, the hands of a waitress who'd served others for years.